Let's talk about a topic that often goes unnoticed in our busy lives today. And I think that is the intersection of menopause and stress. And I think it's also sometimes really hard for us to pull the two apart. So, as women over 40, many of us are struggling with a ton of different responsibilities, right? From raising our kids to demanding careers to even stepping into the role of grandmother. That would be me. And in this whirlwind of caregiving for everyone else, it is so easy to overlook this silent stress that really kind of creeps into our lives. In fact, I find that many of you deny that you're stressed at all, which is to say that you don't recognize you're under stress. It's not that you don't believe you've ever been stressed in your lives, or you don't believe that there's some stress that goes along with the different roles that you play. But at this point, you don't think that you're being stressed by those things, if it makes sense. So in today's episode, what I want to do is talk about some of the signs of stress that we may be ignoring and discuss some of the dangers of neglecting or denying that those things exist. But as always, you know that I'm going to share some really practical tips too, because I want you to be able to emerge stronger through this transformative phase of life. I mean, hell, we've got a lot of years to live, right? Okay, so some of the signs first that I think either you're ignoring or we may take them as indications of something else that's going on, and we may not recognize that they are actually signs of stress. So a couple of them are fatigue or even like insomnia. So if you find yourself constantly tired, maybe you're unable to sleep, maybe you wake up, you go to sleep okay, but then you wake up, so you have this disrupted sleep, right? So fatigue and various forms of insomnia are definitely or can definitely be early signs of stress, especially during menopause. Those hormonal changes that we're going through oftentimes can disrupt our sleep patterns. But when you compound that with stress, even lower levels of stress, it can become a super vicious cycle that can be dangerous. Weight gain is another sign of stress. That sort of, difficulty losing weight, or the unexplained, all of a sudden I have this weight around my middle, and no matter what I do, I hear that oftentimes, I can't get rid of it. Well, our stress hormones can really affect our body's metabolism, and it just makes it even more difficult to lose the extra pounds. And so that can be especially frustrating for women our age when we're going through menopause and we already are struggling with that added weight, right? Mood swings and irritability. Again, menopause itself can bring those things on. But when you add stress into the mix, it really amplifies those emotional fluctuations. You might find yourself like snapping at people, people in your family, your friends, or even at work, which can be especially dangerous. You might feel overwhelmed sometimes by emotions. I know there were several times when I was really struggling with stress taking over in my life, compounded by menopause. There were a couple of times I remember we were going to dinner, we were going to do something, and I did not feel like there was, a big situation going on. And I just went through the doorway, stepped over the threshold, and all of a sudden I was in tears. And I distinctly remember Roger looking at me one day when we were walking out to go to dinner, and he was like, "What is wrong?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just feel crazy." That is stress. That is compounded stress that's not being navigated and managed in a really productive way. Brain fog, the forgetfulness, the things that seem very simple. You walk into a room, you don't know what you went in there for. You can't find your keys, but you just had them when you came in from the grocery store, right? That general sense of like you're in a fog all the time. Those are all signs of chronic stress, and the cognitive effects of that stress can make even mundane sort of daily tasks feel like a never-ending challenge. I'm going to mention one more here because I hear this from you all the time, that sort of chronic physical aches and the pains, right? Persistent headaches. It could be muscle tension, body aches, neck and shoulder soreness. Those can all be physical manifestations of stress. And many times we as women will dismiss these as just sort of normal aches and pains. I've been on my feet all day, when they really could be your body's way of telling you that you need relief, right? When I was working in higher education, and this was several years before I retired, I was under a great deal of stress and it grew, but I didn't even recognize what I was experiencing as stress at all, because I had become so accustomed to the physical and emotional and even psychological sensations of stress that I became numb to them. And I hear and see the same thing all the time when I'm talking to women before they become my clients. And here's an analogy that I like to use that I think is a really apt way of sort of revealing what I'm talking about. Okay. It's like you have a toothache, right? And there's nothing worse than waking up or, this ache just showing up in your mouth all of a sudden. So you have some pain. We don't have time to go to the dentist. You're busy working. You're busy, doing all of the things that I talked about earlier. And so you take some Tylenol or you take some ibuprofen, right? And you think, it'll go away. Whatever it is, it will go away. And it may just be a kind of a nagging, aching sensation in the beginning. Pretty soon, a couple of days roll by, you've been taking Tylenol or whatever to alleviate the sort of irritational pain, and pretty soon you don't feel the pain anymore, right? But the damage is still being done. You've masked that pain with that over-the-counter, Aleve, ibuprofen, whatever it is, that pain relief. And so you don't feel the sensation of the pain from your toothache, but the infection is still there. It still is potentially decaying your tooth. It may even get into your jawbone, and it could even get into your bloodstream. And how many times have you heard, oh my gosh, that, it's crazy. He got an infection that got into, his or her bloodstream, and she was put into the hospital. Really quick story here. That happened to my father-in-law, who never came out of the hospital and in fact ended up passing away. And I'm not saying that stress necessarily caused his demise, but it's definitely something that we don't think is a big deal. We brush it off as something that is minimal. It's just an irritation. And when we do that, like the toothache, stress becomes persistent and prolonged, and it doesn't disappear. It's just that our bodies create this coping mechanism to minimize the pain, to help us to survive what's going on. I remember at one point, again, when I was in higher education and this was happening to me and I didn't even realize it, I had tolerated so much pain and so much stress and didn't feel and wasn't aware of what was going on, that my body said, enough is enough. And one afternoon, I found myself in the ladies' room with a migraine that was so intense that I was vomiting pretty violently and I couldn't even see. My vision was blurred from it. Now, that's a pretty nasty description. Sorry about the TMI, but the point is, when your body has had enough, it is going to do something to make you stop numbing the pain, stop ignoring the pain, right? Ignoring the dangers of stress during menopause can have such a profound negative effect on your physical and your mental health. It can exacerbate your menopausal symptoms. If you think that you've got some weight around your middle that you're struggling to lose now, you ignore stress. Let it manifest for a while. And I'm telling you that the weight around the middle, the brain fog, all of the symptoms, the disrupted sleep, all of the symptoms that you're dealing with now that are sort of natural occurrences through the menopause transition, they will become so much more intense and they will become so much more difficult to deal with, that not only will some of your day-to-day kinds of activities and routines become more difficult, but it will become oppressively difficult in your life during menopause. Not only that, but ignoring danger signs or ignoring stress signs can increase your risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. It can contribute to mental health challenges like anxiety and depression. And all of those risk factors increase percentage-wise when we're in menopause anyway. So ignoring the signs of stress and the negative effects that it's having on your body will just make all of that much more difficult, challenging, and potentially life-threatening. I really don't mean to be like doomsday, being Debbie Downer here, but I cannot emphasize enough the seriousness of ignoring these stress factors. Long-term stress can also, if I can't, get you to pay attention to your body and the signs and really try to intervene and get back on track and get yourself in the right direction. If I can't get you to do it with the very serious kinds of potential dangers that you're running the risk of dealing with, think about this. Long-term stress can accelerate the aging process. It can make it even more challenging, not only to deal with things like the healthy weight or the weight gain that I mentioned earlier, but it will start to affect how you look on the surface. Look in the mirror and you'll notice the dark circles under your eyes, the fine lines becoming deeper wrinkles, your face becoming more gaunt looking, even though your body is plumper. It definitely can make you look 10 years, 15 years, even 20 years older than you are. And I don't know about you, but I don't need any help on that front. I am fine with my appearance aging, adding character to my face, adding a few gray hairs, although I admit to covering those up. But I definitely don't want to exasperate and accelerate that aging process and deal with more skin issues than I have to, right? So the question becomes, what can you do to improve the situation? Definitely one of my biggest tips for you is to acknowledge and accept. What do they say in a 12-step program? The first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem. Well, that may sound funny when I talk about stress, but the first step is really recognizing that stress is a real issue for you. It is a real issue in your life. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a common struggle for many of us at this stage of life, particularly with the high pressure careers that we have built and the full lives that we have, and that it's okay that we have the struggle. What's not okay is ignoring it, brushing it under the rug, sweeping it under the rug, as they say, and thinking that we can just bulldoze our way through each day and that we'll be fine. So you've got to start doing things like prioritizing your own self-care. You've got to carve out time in your busy schedule, whether that's, taking a long bath, finding moments where you can fit in 5 minutes of relaxation, whatever it is. You've got to make it a non-negotiable part of your routine that you take care of yourself on a daily basis. A third tip that I would give you is to seek out support. And that can be on a simpler level and it can be on a more professional level. For sure, talking to friends, being a part of a supportive community of women who are going through similar kinds of struggles, talking to, a family member, those can all be ways that you can get support in your life. But I would really encourage you to think about more professional, expert kinds of support too. Oftentimes, the women who work with me in our 12-week program are securing my support and the support of my team for the professional expert help, experienced help with navigating this struggle on a physical, emotional, and psychological level and hitting it on all fronts. But at the same time, many of the women that I work with are also seeing a therapist. We're working in conjunction with their physician. They are getting, they're taking a multi-pronged professional support approach so that they have the opportunity to not only share their feelings and their experiences, but also they're not hesitating to ask for a much more in-depth type of support that can be incredibly therapeutic, both mentally and physically. Of course, it goes without saying that eating healthy and exercising, doing the kinds of things where you're focused on getting some regular activity in your life, eating foods that are healthier, all of those are going to help you in a general type of way with your weight management, reduce stress, and overall improve your well-being. But for many of you, women who become my clients, doing the traditional quote unquote, I eat healthy and I try to get some exercise isn't enough. And so getting help like the women who are in our 12-week program with a more customized level of what does healthy mean for me at this point? What does my body need in terms of nutrition? What does my body need in terms of exercise and movement? Those can all help you to really manage the stress levels in your life. Setting boundaries is another really appropriate way to manage stress in a healthy way. So learning to say no, for example, overcommitting when you want to be everyone to everyone and always be the person who helps out, whether that's with friends and family or at work, that only adds to your stress level. It's not that you're being a bad friend or a bad leader or a bad employee when you say no. It's about you knowing how to prioritize the things in your work life and your personal life that truly matter. And so one of the things that I work with women in our 12-week program on in a lot of different ways is not only setting those boundaries, but how to maintain and hold those boundaries in a really healthy way. Because when you set boundaries for other people, both professionally and personally, you're going to get some resistance from people. It's going to feel different to them and they're going to push back. And there are a lot of tactics that people will use either intentionally or not to try to break down that barrier, break apart that boundary that you've set. And so knowing how to navigate the people who resist your boundaries is another form of help that you really need to have in your lives. The bottom line is that once we kind of hit that, I say the magical number of 40, I always talk about women over 40, but it really can happen in your late 30s. Some women don't really experience these kinds of struggles until they get into their mid or later 40s, and some not until they get into their 50s. So there is no magical number, but at whatever point you start to feel like I'm taking on a number of roles in my life, and if you're honest with yourself that taking on all of those different roles and the added responsibility that comes with it, at some point, our bodies also start to change. And then you add to that we also begin to kind of get used to neglecting our own well-being through that process. It can be the perfect storm for a tsunami of terribleness. And even though we are so determined and we are so strong and we can get through and persevere through so many things, at some point it catches up to you. Menopause and stress is a really challenging combination for us, but it's not one that we cannot thrive through. It's not just about surviving menopause. It's about having the awareness and being proactive with our self-care, having a strategy in place and support in place that helps us to navigate this phase of life in a healthy way, but also in a way that we can thrive and move into these next years strong physically and mentally, and really enjoying all of the wisdom that we have gathered from the experiences that we have lived up to this point. There is so much to flourish about. Remember that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It is really a vital step toward you being healthier and happier and having a future that's carved out for you to live that way too. I deserve it. I became aware of that a number of years ago. And trust me when I tell you that you deserve it too. I hope this was helpful today. Thanks so much for listening in. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. Please rate and review the episode. Reach out to me with questions or comments. I love to hear how these episodes sit with you. What aha moments do you take away from them? Thanks so much again for being here, and I'll meet you right back here next week.